2NURFM 103.7. Each and every Tuesday, we take a wander through the world of politics, and we do that with Dr. Jim Jose from the University of Newcastle, our Professor of Politics. Jim, good morning, firstly.
Good morning, Mark.
Royal Commission into Aged Care basically unleashed yesterday with a report. Lots of chat will happen about that, I'm sure, over the days and weeks to come. In essence, are Royal Commissions a silver bullet to solving any of the problems they tend to shine a spotlight on?
Well, it's difficult to answer in any direct fashion, Mark. Like all things political, and Royal Commissions are in fact political entities, there are multiple rationales for setting them up or functions that they serve, some more obvious and direct than others. So, for example, there might be an issue which is arising that the government wants some short, sharp answers to, but it needs a committee with extra powers to enable that to happen, which a Royal Commission can compel people to come and testify and give evidence and so forth. So there's issues of limited compass that the government wants answers to. Then there are issues that arise or problems that arise that are huge problems that are causing lots of malaise, shall we say, lots of ways in which people are getting really angry and upset. So the government might decide to set up a Royal Commission to investigate that. It might also set up a Royal Commission to try and mediate conflicting positions on controversial issues. So it's not so much looking for solutions to the issues as such, but more looking to reconcile people to the range of options that might be available. So that's three. A fourth one is more about governments saying, oh, we'll set up a Royal Commission into X, and say, like, in particular, this is the Royal Commission into Aged Care. Not coincidentally, it was set up in late 2018 as an election was looming in 2019. So this is the sort of function of a Royal Commission that allows the government to say, we're doing something about the problem. So, work is in train, work is in progress. That's sort of what happened with the Royal Commission into Aged Care. And there's a couple of other minor issues too, Mark. One is that there's an educational function that these commissions serve, is that with media coverage and people talking about it, the government is able to try and, in a sense, cultivate the view that it would like to see emerge. And if often committees do that. And finally, Royal Commissions are often simply to allow grievances to be aired in a way that allows people to feel like they've been heard, but in the end, the government isn't really going to do much about it. So,
well, that's the problem, isn't it, Jim? I mean, they're very expensive talk fests at least. I mean, we know that much. And quite a lot of times we have these events come up, the Royal Commission into issue X, whatever it happens to be. But if they come up with a whole lot of findings that should be implemented, or those feel should be implemented, and not a hell of a lot happens, that can actually, you would think that could be bad politically as well.
Well, yes, there is that possibility when you have Royal Commissions with huge recommendations, a huge number of recommendations, like the Royal Commission into misconduct in banking and finance and superannuation,
particularly when you hear every time that comes up, there's still X number of recommendations that haven't been followed through, because there was a ton out of that one.
There were 76 recommendations in all. About 45 are still to be taken up. Some of those, though, in fairness to the government, some of them are on a rolling schedule. More critically, though, being more critical of the government, some of those could have been done much more speedily, but the government did a very slow take-up. More worrying was the Treasurer's announcement that he's going to roll back a couple of the key recommendations, one in particular dealing with the responsible banking process, which was going to tighten up the way in which banks were able to operate. He's now scrapping that at this stage. So that's that. Now we've got the Royal Commission into Aged Care, Mark. We've got, I think it's 140 plus recommendations. Just even trying to read it, for anyone interested in reading it, there are 5 volumes, and of those 5 volumes, 2 have 2 sub-volumes and, one has 2 sub-volumes and another one has 3 sub-volumes. So it's something like about 8 or 9 big fat documents, which doesn't cover all of the appendices and so forth. And a lot of reading,
and not light reading by any means. I mean, and particularly once you get into something like aged care, I mean, very important and very, very heavy the subject matter as well.
Well, one of those things, Mark, one of the difficulties, and it's hard to know which way the politics of this is running, because the 2 commissioners who undertook the Royal Commission disagree as to the way in which the model, the way in which the funding model should operate. Now, the current model has been in operation since 1997, when John Howard's government implemented the Aged Care Act, and a quite different version of the way in which aged care was managed in Australia. We've now had that for 23 years, and we're in a situation where there's some really serious issues and some really terrible things have gone on. One Royal Commissioner seems to be putting the focus on it needs to be needs-based, universal. We take the people who actually live in aged care as the sort of yardstick. They're the ones we go to for information and how we deal with it. Whereas the other commissioner is more for keeping something like the current model. That commissioner has a different outlook and sees a different governance mode in place. Not different from what's current, but rejigging it. And in her view, it seems that the system itself is not the problem. It's got some issues and we can fix them, but a wholesale paradigm change, which is what the other commissioner is looking at. So the government is now in a situation where it's not a bad situation for the government, because it can then play around with not only the 145 recommendations, but it can also play around with how it rolls out the particular solutions that it comes up with. Meanwhile, it can say, well, we are working on it and we are going to act on it. The 450 million that it suddenly found and made available to the aged care sector to go on with the meantime, there's no sort of clarification yet as to exactly how that and what that's going to be used for. But 450 million in a situation where the aged care sector has basically been cut in its budgets by about $9.5 billion over the past 20 years. So there's a lot of ground to make up, and for the government there's a lot of hard thinking, but politically it's in a position where it can continue to say that it is doing something, and it will look like it's doing something because it will have a veritable backlog of announcements it can continue to make for at least several months.
Well, hopefully we get some of the key recommendations put forward. Hopefully something more happens than just a talk fest, because we've had more of those on aged care than I've had baked dinners. Jim?
20.
There you go.
20 reviews into aged care in the past 20 years.
All right. Thank you very much on this, Jim Joseph, Professor of Politics. Have a great week. Talk to you next Tuesday.
My pleasure, Mark. See you next week.
2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.